Much like for the collapse of the Big 12, Missouri is still getting blamed for everything, and I'll explain why right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball for you here on this Black Friday, but no game today for the first time in many years. No, of course, we're just the tune-up now is Missouri for everything else. I liked our main event slot, but you know what? Now the Chiefs took it from us. My beloved Chiefs have taken Black Friday from the Tigers. What are you going to do? Got to talk about, of course, Mizzou basketball, a huge Cal game coming up. Is Sam Pittman's job on the line tomorrow? How about Eli's national perception? Well, before I start the show, I want to tell you, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you watched this week's SEC squad, well, you know that me and Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football got into a bit of an argument about the Big Ten against the SEC. Of course, I think I started it off by basically making fun of Kansas, which Spencer took as a defense of Missouri for some reason. These young folks just don't know about the Jayhawks and the Tigers rivalry, do they? But I have to say after my discussion with Spencer, the last thing I said was, hey man, nobody's even talking about Missouri anymore. We're out of the college football playoff race. Well, I got to say, I was completely wrong about that because it wasn't just Spencer. There's been a lot of people nationally, including, well, one of my newest colleagues over at the Locked On Network, Barrett Sallee. A lot of people are upset. They're going, how are the Tigers still ranked? What is going on here? As if Missouri has been much worse than, say, Illinois and UNLV, the teams that were ranked right around them before the latest iteration of the playoff rankings. To me, I just don't see it. This whole argument is in service, by the way. It's not that anybody particularly is upset about Missouri, of course, but it's in service of all the people who dislike the SEC, think the SEC is overrated, and all that good stuff. And just objectively speaking as I can say it, the advanced statistical case for the SEC not being the best conference, it's just not there. The SEC is pretty clearly still the best conference. You can say maybe not as dominant as it was a few years ago. Hey, that's a whole other discussion. But especially the middle and bottom half of the two leagues, if we're talking Big Ten against the SEC, my question to Spencer was basically, hey, you're looking at a couple teams that are tied for 8th currently in the standings. You got Ole Miss and Missouri versus Michigan or Minnesota. Basically the same spot in the standings there. To me, there's not much of a comparison. Ole Miss and Missouri were teams that have been in the discussion for the college football playoff really the whole season until the last week or two in Missouri's case. But Michigan and Minnesota, they've been out of the national conversation since September, as far as I can tell. So to me, there really is there's just no comparison there. Sure, you can compare the top of the league, Oregon, who is Spencer's squad, by the way. Sure, Oregon and Ohio State, I'll put them against anybody in the SEC. I'll agree with you there. I just think the middle to the back end of the conference, I think the depth there is still pretty obvious. My buddy Brandon Olson over at Locked On Gators, he's been trashing Florida all season. Well, you know what? Florida's been pretty good the last month or so with DJ Lagway at quarterback. I've been semi-jokingly saying, hey, wait for Billy Napier's contract extension. I say semi-jokingly, because it really could happen. That is college football. You get a 500 season and we're not ready to fire you, well, you get an extension. Eli Drinkwitz knows all about that too well. And speaking of Eli Drinkwitz, Let's talk about his national perception a little bit, because for all the people, Missouri fans, who may think the season has already been lost, this Arkansas game really isn't all that important, I just would totally disagree, because coming into this offseason, I had lots of colleagues, especially on the SEC squad, who were telling me, hey, that's great. Missouri had an 11-win season last year. But that's just one season. Before that, Eli Drinkwitz was a 500 coach for all intents and purposes at Missouri. And to that, I would say, fair enough. There's really no argument against that. So it's not just all about the playoff. If Missouri comes through with a 9-win regular season, maybe follows it up with a bowl win as well and gets to 10, well, now all of a sudden that whole talking point of 2023 being a fluke, well, that's a tough case to make. And really, it is, when people talk about narratives, what they're really talking about is public perception. The basic public perception is something that carries down and into recruiting. Obviously, kids, high school kids, teenagers are very much easy to influence. It's not as though they're all independent thinkers. Let's put it that way. So yes, the larger sort of narrative around and public perception around Eli and this program is really, really important. There's going to be no more of this 500 talk, especially if Missouri finishes this season with a couple more victories. Now, as for Sam Pittman and his perception, well, obviously beating Missouri finally would go a long way for him. But here's the deal. I did say on the SEC squad, hey, Missouri is going to cover the spread and whip Arkansas so hard that Sam Pittman is going to get fired after the game. Well, I was being entertaining, a little bit bold, as I often like to do, especially on the SEC squad. So to be honest with all of you, I certainly can't say for certain whether Sam Pittman is coaching for his job or not. In fact, I had at least one Arkansas fan who said, or at least one commenter, I should say, it may well have been a Missouri fan now that I think about it, but at least one person said, no, that's not going to happen. Pittman is safe. He's not going to be coaching for his job here. All I would say to that is, without having any real insider knowledge, of course, on the Arkansas job, or even doing a deep dive into message board rumors in Hogville or anything like that, I'll just say this. From my perception, Arkansas has been big game hunting lately. I think another 500 season, especially the Razorbacks lose this game to Missouri. You're looking at a 6-6 season here. That's not exactly knocking anybody's socks off in Fayetteville these days. When you look at the environment over at the other major sport, men's basketball, what just happened there? Oh, yeah. Their coach, who went to 2 straight Elite Eights at one point, was bringing in all types of big-time recruits, and Eric Musselman. Well, where is he now? He's at Southern Cal, and in comes John Calipari. There's a pretty big name for you. You're telling me there isn't some money slushing around with the Hunt family, the Waltons, all these different people, the Hunt trucking family, that is. My point here is that if Eric Musselman, who, I think technically left on his own accord, of course, but I think if things were all rosy between him and the powers that be, the big-time boosters in Arkansas, well, I think he would still be around. Things were going well in Arkansas for Musselman. But here's the deal. At Missouri, if you're Eli Drinkwitz and you have some winning seasons, well, they basically give you carte blanche and contract extensions. In Fayetteville, apparently the bar is higher. I'll just say that, at least for the powers that be in Fayetteville. That's all I can say there. So my point here is, if I'm Sam Pittman, whether I go 6-6 or 7-5, I'm not sleeping that well at night. So to anybody who says, hey, there's no way, he's definitely safe, you're a lot more sure of that than I am. Now, the good news for Arkansas is reportedly their quarterback, Taylen Green, is about as close to 100% as he's going to get at this point in the season. And that's a huge deal for the Hogs, because their offense is so much more explosive when Green's legs are a weapon. So let's talk more about that Arkansas offense and what to expect from the high variance hogs tomorrow. But first, let's talk some FanDuel, because you got to get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch during the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So if you haven't seen Arkansas play since Missouri took on the Hogs at the end of last season, well, the Arkansas offense is a lot better this year, to say the least, or at least the ceiling of Arkansas's offense is certainly a lot higher than it was at the end of the season. Bobby Petrino, the erstwhile head coach of Arkansas, has definitely made a clear difference. They run a lot of motion, a lot of play action, designed runs when Green is healthy at quarterback. I mean, there really is a lot to prepare for, but at the same time, it seems there's a lot to prepare for the Arkansas team offensively as well, and at times that throws them off schedule. It's just a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties, but there's obvious talent on this team. Unfortunately, while there's some explosive players at the skill positions, some good players at the skill positions, quite a bit of injuries on the offensive line, unfortunately, if you're an Arkansas fan, obviously. Their center, Addison Nichols, left the game at one point against Louisiana Tech last week, but he did return and looks to be okay as the starting center this week. And when you look at the stats, you look at the advanced stats, these teams are pretty close on paper, but that's why it's important, in my view, to actually watch the game sometimes, because Missouri just looks like, well, certainly a much more complete and less mistake-prone offense right now, to say the least, and that's not even really close. But I will say the Missouri defense right now, the last few weeks, has definitely been trending the wrong way. And while Arkansas did ultimately have a comfortable final score victory over Louisiana Tech last week, they didn't exactly get off to a great start. Although it looked like a great start, Rodney Hill runs back the opening kickoff, seemingly about 100 yards for a touchdown, but in classic 2024 Arkansas fashion, a penalty brings it back to the Hogs' own 4-yard line. They then punt there, a 19-yard punt return on the next series, again, called back because the returner had his knee down. This is the high variance Hogs in a nutshell. Every time they hit an explosive play, seems like half the time it's coming back for some sort of mistake, usually a holding penalty on a big Taylen Green third down scramble, for instance. And while Green is a really talented player, he's got the arm, he's got the legs, the decision-making still leaves a lot to be desired at times, and I've seen Arkansas play quite a bit this year. To me, lately, Green has not looked quite as comfortable or as confident as he did in the first half of the season, and especially, I thought, against a Louisiana Tech team that, again, a solid defense, I think, Louisiana Tech has, but to me, Green should have looked more comfortable than this at this point in the season, especially with still having Jaquindon Jackson at running back behind him. Jafar Armstrong is a heck of a talent at wide receiver too, but my question again, the high variance Hogs, sure, they can hit some big plays on you. They're talented enough to scare you, but where are the real chain movers on this team, especially in the passing game? Outside of Jaquindon Jackson in that running game, and Green will keep it occasionally too, that'll move the chains. But when it's 3rd and 7, as long as you can stop that Green scramble, which is a real question, Missouri's had some trouble stopping the scramble, especially against Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. But I just think if the Tigers can stop that, if they can concentrate on that, maybe as they did more against Boston College and Thomas Castellanos, I think Missouri's defense should be in for a bounce-back week here. I really do. But it is concerning how the Tigers are seemingly going the wrong direction defensively here the last month or so. And by the way, in case you missed it, you probably saw on Wednesday, Missouri, in their previous basketball game, let's see, who was Missouri's previous opponent? I'm already forgetting. Let's kill some time. Yes, the Lindenwood Lions of St. Charles, Missouri. Caleb Grill down for several minutes after getting his neck sort of snapped back in a very, very scary situation. Grill taken off the court on a stretcher, gave us a thumbs up as he was leaving the court. So that was a good sign initially there. Per a team spokesman after the game, Grill, quote, a head and neck injury. He is responsive and was taken to the hospital out of precaution. At the moment, there is no timetable for his return. So obviously good to hear that Caleb is up and walking and all that good stuff. Taken out of the hospital, was taken to the hospital as a precaution, has been released now. That's all good news as far as his long-term health. You do wonder a little bit, is he going to miss a week or two, maybe a month? Who the heck knows with that neck injury? Obviously, the Tigers were very smart, the medical staff, very smart to be cautious in that type of situation and probably be cautious with it moving forward, neck type of stuff. Who knows? He could be back on Tuesday against Cal, or it could be a few weeks. Who knows at this point? But the good news is Caleb Grill seems like he's going to, for the most part, be okay. On the basketball part, we'll just have to see here in due time. But speaking of Cal coming up here on Tuesday, obviously a fairly big-name squad, a former Pac-12 squad, and Dennis Gates' alma mater, by the way. But Cal just 121 in the KenPom ratings right now. Tigers projected to win that game by 11 points. So to me, this is a must-win game. About as close to a must-win game at this point of the season as you're going to get anyway. Because if Missouri's going to make the tournament, this is, other than, if you're going to lose this game, then you've got Kansas and Illinois are the only two really good teams, obviously. It's the only chance you have to have an impressive result in the non-conference at all if you don't beat California. So to me, this is a low-key, really big game for the entire Missouri basketball season, by the way. And also, hey, how about a UConn update for you, since I mentioned that UConn was beaten by Memphis, Missouri's first opponent of the season. Well, then I pointed out UConn, the next game, lost to Colorado in the Maui Invitational Tournament. Well, make it the hat trick. 3 straight losses for UConn, losing to a good Dayton team. UConn went from ranked 6th in these 3 games in KenPom's rankings to 28th after a sweep in Maui. Hey, still a good win for Missouri's lone loss in Memphis. Really, I just want to point out that obviously KenPom is far from definitive at this point, to say the least. There's going to be plenty of room for Missouri and everybody else to move up, to move down, and all that good stuff. Obviously, Missouri took a long, long tumble for where they started off the season ranked last year. So a heck of a lot of time to go in the season. Also, one final note on the Caleb Grill injury. When he was concerningly down on the court for quite some time, well, there wasn't much of a tone change in Mizzou Arena as the usual timeout festivities continued. Hey, Mizzou Arena, give us your best sprinkler cam. Hey, that whole thing. I was going, maybe read the room a little bit and turn down the music just at least until Caleb gets off of the wood here, off of the hardwood. I thought that was, maybe just a slight note there for the arena in-game entertainment. I can laugh about it now because it looks like Caleb is going to be okay. But you know what? Coming up on the program, want to answer some of your questions, including about Luther Burden's potential participation in the Missouri Bowl game, coming up after these quick words. All right, let's take some of your questions, including from Rick, who says, think Luther will opt out of the bowl game. Maybe you can walk and rock, but we need you in the bowl game. First of all, walk and rock. That's a fantastic phrase to use for Missouri's senior day. I think the Tigers should take that hashtag immediately. All you got to do is just credit my listener, Rick, for it. But as to if I think Luther will opt out of the bowl game, I got to think he probably will. If I got to put money on it today, I'm guessing Luther probably will opt out of the bowl game. I'm thinking back to the Armed Forces Bowl a few years ago when Tyler Beatty was a borderline late round draft pick for Missouri, and the Tigers chose to sit him out of what was a relatively meaningless bowl game. Obviously, the Tigers are going to be playing in a more high-tier bowl game than that this season, no matter what happens against Arkansas. But still, it's going to be below the Cotton Bowl, going to be below, your usual traditional big boy bowls, BCS bowls, obviously the playoff as well. So if I were a betting man, I'd say, yeah, I think Arkansas is probably going to be Luther Burden's finale. And ProRex 1911 on YouTube says, you, John, mentioned before the season started that South Carolina would potentially be a tough game, and I think you said a possible loss. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, unfortunately, I normally love being right there, ProRex, but I would have loved to have been wrong in this case. Actually, I had the Tigers, my preseason prediction, I had the Missouri going 11-1 with a loss at South Carolina. Part of my logic, which wasn't really logic, was saying, hey, I've never seen Missouri actually win a true road game that I've attended. So, you know what? We're keeping that streak alive and well. They got to give me a gimme at some point. I should have traveled to UMass this year just to get that monkey off of my back. But indeed, I did predict the South Carolina loss there. I just had a feeling that this could be a tougher game than people are expecting. So I was right about that. What I was wrong about is I would have never expected Missouri to have gotten beaten as badly as it did in College Station in particular. The Alabama game, obviously some injury-related quarterback issues. There's some different circumstances there, but the Texas A&M game, yeah, that's one I wish we could just hit the reset button and try again. It just seemed like everything was going wrong for Missouri from the word go there for sure. And in spite of this, I suppose you could say a relatively disappointing season. If it was playoff or bust, well, I guess it's a bust then. But to me, there's got to be more subtlety than that. And a lot of listeners agree with me, including Roger, who says, I am very proud of this football team and what they have done for the past 2 years. This team had true grit. This is a brotherhood. Arkansas is no joke, and we'll have to play our best to get a victory next week, but 9-3 is very respectable in the SEC. Sometimes the breaks don't go your way. I still feel the horrible officiating in the A&M game had a lot to do with the momentum of the game, and if those two horrible calls had been reversed, the outcome would have been much different. But this team was still putting its identity together, and it was their job to overcome those calls. I have watched Mizzou football since 1975, and I feel these last 2 years have been my favorite teams of all time. Let's hope we can keep this brotherhood going next year. Well, Roger, well said. I couldn't agree more on just about everything there. As far as the officiating, the horrible officiating from the A&M game, I definitely remember a couple of calls that went against Missouri. That again, big momentum plays. I can't say that if those went our way, well, Missouri definitely would have won. But like you said, I wish we could have just hit the reset button. Or like I said, I wish we could just hit the reset button on that game and see how it goes again. But unfortunately, this is not PlayStation 5. You don't get any do-overs in real life. So obviously A&M deserved the victory very much on that particular day. But hopefully I've deserved your listenership and viewership today. Appreciate you joining me here on this Black Friday. You're not gonna get any better deals than a free edition of Locked On Mizzou, by golly. So until next time, I'll see you all post game after Arkansas, probably Sunday morning, maybe Saturday night. I think Sunday morning's more realistic. Let's be honest. So I'll see you all then. right here on Locked On Mizzou.